procreate, but I would totally have his abortion.
Sorry, fellas. Yeah, didn't see you there. As you probably see, I've kind of been lounging around since the last video, doing some stuff and just watching some genuine cinema, if you know what I mean. But anyways, why are we here? We're here to talk about a cool game that I've been playing through lately that has really caught my eye and I really enjoy. But before we get into that, we gotta talk about one of my favorite board games out there, and that is, of course, Eldritch Horror. Eldritch Horror is a wonderful board game set within H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos and has you and some friends globetrotting from exotic locales to the most backwater villages to stop a god or an evil entity and his legion of awful, disgusting, gross minions from destroying mankind and hopefully keeping some of your sanity along the way. But it's going to be a hard task due to the large variety of encounters and monsters that you face. One moment you might be dealing with fish people in Innsmouth, and the next you'll be trying to find your way back from Lost Carcosa. Now, in April of the year 2021, Anno Domini, there's some peculiarities going around which limit me from playing with my friends. Prime of which is the fact that there's a whole squad of Interpol troops outside of my house, ready to storm in at any moment and gonna gun me down at any site. So, can't really invite any fellas over. But, what if I told you I have a secret? I got a plan up my sleeve. Come here. What if I told you there was a game kinda like Eldritch Horror, but not quite. You don't need no friends because this game is a computer game. Interesting, huh? Well, I'm gonna let you in, fellas. Because that game is called World of Horror by Panstasz. Panstasz? Ugh, Polish names. Anyways, World of Horror by Panstasz. Here we go. Short disclaimer for everybody watching, but do know that World of Horror as of April 2021 is still in early access, with the current version being 0.9.17, but as soon you'll see, that should not deter you from wanting to get the game at all, because even in early access, there is a lot to cover. Set in Shiokawa, a town in Japan in 1980X, World of Horror tasks you with choosing one of several high school students and solving a series of mysteries with multiple branching endings and hopefully in time to stop one of the gods that you have chosen at the beginning of the game from destroying reality. And similarly to the board game, World of Horror has this, let's call it a sandbox aspect of the game that shows up right here at the beginning with a variety of different options to go through, ranging from what sort of gods you want to deal with or what player character you're going to start off with, and even changing how the UI looks with 1 or 2-bit aesthetics and a variety of different changing colors. There is also at the beginning a few shorter scenarios that will get you accustomed to how the game works without tacking on a bunch of other mechanics. So these first 2 scenarios are the ones that I would definitely play for first time players. Now, as you can see, there's probably a lot to talk about this game's visual and thematic influences. But first, before we get into that, let's talk about the gameplay mechanics this game's got going for it. So to start out, the very basis of the game is that all the time while you're playing it, you have this sort of ticking clock element that is continually counting from 0 all the way to 100, sort of like the Doom track in Eldritch Horror. You, as a student or investigator, basically have to complete a series of mysteries or cases regarding whatever deity you have chosen and hope to complete the game on time, or at the very least make it through a case alive and sane. Now, Doom isn't something that is counting up in real time, so don't worry if you let the game idle for a little bit or you're reading a long passage, because it's not going to increase that way. It will only increase on most actions that you do. From here, the game opens up in a sense in what you can do. At first, you can spend a little bit of time in your apartment, resting up and seeing what lies before you, and then you choose one of 5 mysteries to solve. The mysteries themselves are wonderfully varied and interesting to go through. One places you in a school where you have to solve the case of an extra-dimensional vengeful entity known as the Scissors Lady that cuts up people, or in another you have to figure out what happened to the local botanist after discovering a new strange of invasive fungus. Once you've chosen a mystery to pursue, that's where the game really opens up and it feels a lot like Eldritch Horror. Each character, similar to Eldritch Horror, has a variety of different stats ranging from strength, dexterity, perception, and knowledge, with the last attribute being the most important of all, which is money. Now these attributes change with the character. For obvious reasons, the photographer is going to have a higher perception, while the teen idol will be more charismatic, and believe me, you're going to have tons of opportunities to get tested on the various skills. Now the attributes are not permanent either, and depending on the outcome of certain events, can change in ways that are very fascinating. One such way that is probably the most common is via a variety of injuries that you'll come across while fighting the different monsters, but more on that a bit later. Finally, the last two things that you'll have to worry about are stamina and reason, which is basically the HP and sanity from Eldritch Horror. Either one gets to 0 and damn, you're done, kiddo. From there we have things that you can acquire out in the world, which is basically split between items that you can buy or find in the investigations, allies that you can recruit from at school to help you out in a variety of different scenarios, and lastly magic spells they can use to help you out, but always at a price. And believe me fellas, you're going to want everything in your arsenal for the damn things you're gonna face in these investigations, because they're pretty nasty. Yeah, fellas, the investigations are going to be pretty damn brutal due to all the gruesome events and encounters that you're going to come across. Now, I'll talk about the narrative qualities of these encounters a bit later because I want to get the mechanics out of the way, but if you've been paying attention, they're pretty damn cool. Nearly every encounter you go through is going to deplete your stamina, reason, or advance doom further and overall try to ruin your day. But with some simple preparation and some reading, we can alleviate these problems. And well, at least attempt to. See, these encounters are basically the same that you come across in Eldritch Horror, but instead of a simple good old dice roll, the machine we call a computer is going to calculate the roll for you, and we can make it easier for ourselves if we read what the things have to say and try for the best roll. For example, you may get a little peckish and want to grab a bite from the local village's manchewok, and then you gasp in horror at the monstrosities that they serve as food. Then you're given the choice of either going hungry or that horrid 3-item combo for the elder knowledge or something. Seriously fellas, manchewok at the SeaTac A gates, never again. Now on the other hand, events might be solved easier with certain inventory items that you might have equipped. For example, you could be looking for a specific gravestone and having a shovel on you will expedite getting to that dead drop full of money. Sometimes though, bud, you ain't so lucky and you'll have a short little event without any options that usually negatively affect you. Like you ever walk downtown and wonder why nobody is around and you get the creeps? Well, you just lost some reason. Of course, other times the game will give you some much needed respite. You might be losing your nerves and you go to meet a priest who happens to be a family friend and you'll regain some reason, or it can be attributed to some items that you have in your inventory. You might have a pack of cigs and it will spawn an event of a much needed smoke to get the edge off. Now the worst offenders of prematurely ending your life or sending you too soon to the loony bin are the horrific and grotesque monsters that you're going to fight throughout the game. And believe me fellas, you're going to want to make sure that you want to pick that fight. Good old combat. The perfect chance to get your ass killed, but anything is worth it if we save the world, even if only for a little while. Combat starts off and immediately it's way different than what you would expect from Eldritch Horror. While in that game you want to get enough strength to overcome the enemy and hopefully damage it at the chance of a dice roll, World of Horror is a bit different. The main mechanic that combat is centered around is a sort of time management system where the player only has around 200 move points or so to make whatever moves they want to do. You can use that time to look for a way out and run away from whatever the hell you came across, or you can instead use that same amount of time to scrounge the local area for a makeshift weapon, like a big stick or a broken bottle that will help you defend yourself from the local stalker, probably one of the freedom stoners. At the same time, there's different support options that can be done, like sending one of your helpful allies to go die for you, or distract the enemy while you try to do something and save a little bit of reason or stamina. At times, especially with enemies that you encounter at the end of a mystery, there might be some specific actions relating to the location that you can do. such as finding a nearby lamp to destroy the macabre body shop of a mermaid enthusiast, though these actions have their own consequences, such as in this case, destroying all the evidence of the investigation. Lastly, we have some spiritual actions that have very peculiar mechanics attached to them. See that the way that they work is that you have to guess a series of bows and claps to dispel some sort of goddamn spooks from your sight. You may put down 3 claps and 2 bows and it might dispel the entity, or most likely do nothing. Rule of thumb for me is to do all claps the first time to figure out how many you got right and then figure it out from there. But to be completely honest with you fellas, I almost never use the spiritual actions in combat. I find that they take way too long to figure out to beat the enemy when either more hands-on approaches would have worked better or even just getting the hell out of there. Now you may be asking me, hey Tom, why are you explaining basically the minutia of this entire game? And the fact of the matter is, fellas, is that you're going to want to know how this game plays to see every single cool little event or story that World of Horror has to offer, because they're all so wonderfully cool, grotesque, and goopy. To start off, we have to talk about the 2 incredibly obvious but seriously damn cool influences that World of Horror has going for it, and that's the equal influences of the work of Howard Phillips Lovecraft and his Cthulhu mythos, and the surreal and visceral urban legend stories and aesthetic of prolific Japanese horror author Junji Ito. There's the gods, for instance, that take a lot of influence from H.P. Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos, with names like oh god, help me out with these, Itathu the Devouring Flame or Ag-Yoloth the Towering Eye, which are only really a hop and a skip away from joining the pantheon of outer gods like Yog-Sothoth or Azathoth or Nyarlathotep. I also feel that you get a lot of the Lovecraft influences with themes like elder lore and magics having a real damaging quality to them, since these are aspects of our reality that some would find mentally destructive. For instance, in Eldritch Horror and the Call of Cthulhu tabletop RPG, magic is something that you really want to make sure that you want to get into, because every use of magic or even witnessing it being performed will take a toll on your sanity, or even drawing the unwanted attention of powers beyond our comprehension. Though admittedly, World of Horror is a PC game that takes a lot of influences from a board game, so you won't see anything so specific like a spell bringing a god's goons closer to you, only really advance Doom further. But that's pretty much what I got for the Lovecraft influences. I know there's probably a lot of smaller ones like spooky villages with dark secrets and things coming out of the sea to wreak havoc on the happiness of the people of Shiokawa, but really that's all I gotta talk for. So now that we got Lovecraft out of the way, and believe me fellas, I could go on and on about Lovecraft, but at this point I feel it's fair that we gotta start talking about the other big influence of World of Horror, and that is of course esteemed Japanese author and mangaka Junji Ito. For the fellas that are unaware of Junji Ito and his work, then man, there is a lot to talk about because the influences in World of Horror are all over the damn game. Ranging from some of the mysteries and the monsters to a large part of the monochromatic aesthetic of the game, you see it pretty much everywhere. His style, if I had to narrow it down simply, is in my opinion this wonderfully grotesque mix of frightening, surreal visuals, juxtaposed with the more mundanely beautiful characters that work off each other in really horrifying ways. As Ito has stated himself, a lot of what he would describe his horror comes from a sort of imbalance of the natural world, or an actual quote from him in taking something normal and looking at it backwards. In essence, it's the suspense and anxiety that comes from things that should be normal but don't really quite hit the mark. Like there's something terribly wrong with whatever you're looking at and it makes it turn into uncanny valley territory. This suspense eventually leads us to shocking revelations of horror, completely shattering the view of what you suspected to be the world and revealing instead something immensely horrifying. To the average person, things will never be the same again. And in that sense, we actually get to see Junji Ito's influences in good old H.P. Lovecraft in the sense of world-shattering revelations that can absolutely destroy someone's sanity, or I guess in this game, reason. Now honestly fellas, I could spend all day talking about H.P. Lovecraft, his cat, and of course, Junji Ito. But let's bring back the focus into the game and let's talk about the influences that Junji Ito has on it, because they're really, really interesting. Going back to the idea of mundane, everyday occurrences taking horrific turns for the worse, you see that in pretty much most of the mysteries that you investigate in this game. And similar to a lot of Ito and even Lovecraft's work, it starts off small time, such as the arrival of a festival that only happens once every 29 years, turning into an elaborate ritual to resurrect a lesser forest god. Or the disappearances of sailors eventually leading to the discovery of a black goo that is kind of like a Shoggoth that is devouring sailors and causing the population to be terrified of the ocean. Now, while there's only about a dozen or so greater mysteries, the amount of smaller, different, and seemingly random events that you can come across is astronomical. If I recall correctly, there's around 150 or so of them. Though I will say that you probably won't see them all in one playthrough, as there's a few of them that are locked off until you save the world a couple times, at which it then adds about 5 or so at a time, and then you gotta save the world a few more times to unlock some more. But believe me, fellas, these short, little, self-contained events will make you want to go through the game numerous times to see them all, as well as meet all the grotesque monsters that you're gonna see throughout the damn game. Speaking of grotesque, we should probably start talking about the wonderful, horrid little aesthetic that World of Horror has going for it, because the thing that is so wonderfully cool is that each individual element and frame in this game is hand-drawn by Panstasz himself. First thing you're gonna notice when booting up World of Horror is that the game is only one bit in its aesthetic, which gives it a stark contrast to a lot of other games out there. Especially other horror games where the only games that I can compare it to might be Faith or Horror of Salazar House, which I actually did a review on. What's wild for me is that every single character, location, event, and monster are drawn by Panstasz humbly on good old MS Paint. And even though it's lacking in color, it for sure is not lacking in style. What I really seem to enjoy about the simple 1 or 2-bit aesthetic is that it really reminds me a lot of reading manga or similarly done black and white comics. It gives it this kind of retro feel, like you're opening up some poorly printed bootleg in the early 90s or the late 80s. And of course, now that we're talking about the 80s, I feel like 1980s Japan is the perfect setting for World of Horror. There's something about this era that really I can't quite put my thumb on, but it really makes me want to gravitate towards it. It could be, that some of my favorite anime films and series sprung out of the 80s, like Zeta Gundam or Akira, Pat Labor, and Bubblegum Crisis, or a bunch of other shows that creep into the 90s, kind of like Ghost in the Shell, Evangelion, and of course, the space epic Legend of Galactic Heroes. But 1980s Japan for World of Horror, like 1920s New England for H.P. Lovecraft stories, seemed like a timeless fit for me. It's a game that, with its aesthetic, I feel is going to stand the test of time and be enjoyed for years to come. And honestly, fellas, that is pretty much the bulk of what I want to talk about with World of Horror. It takes one of my favorite little games in Eldritch Horror and my favorite settings of H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos, and it takes it and spins it up with a nice, wonderful cocktail of Junji Ito. But before I let this game go, let me put this thing down. There is a few things that I do want to talk about first, because they're a little concerning. Earlier on in the video, I mentioned that World of Horror is currently in development and can be found in itch.io or Steam in early access. And for some fellas, that's already enough for them to say, no thanks, I'll just wait till it's done. Which is a fair opinion to have. Some people want a hopefully complete game, then they'll wait till it launches. Now, World of Horror as it stands right now is pretty much a complete game. You can do tons of stuff within the current build of the game and enjoy some ghastly adventures in 1980s Japan. The more troubling thing is that as of late April 2021 that I feel I should voice is that the game and developer has kind of gone into radio silence. Nothing has been heard from him since the end of last year, at least from what I can gather. I tried to give Panstasz a message, seeing if the game was still in active development, but as of this video, I still haven't received a message. And while I think he might be coming back eventually, or working on a big 1.0 patch, I can't rule out the possibility that the game might just remain unfinished. What's worse even still is that as of the last thing he did before going radio silent is to turn off the save feature since it was causing some issues, and since then hasn't turned it back on since he hasn't updated the game. Now for myself, it's not a huge deal since you can run through the whole game over an hour or so, but if you're trying to play in higher difficulties, you might want to save every single step of the way through your arduous game. Or just genuinely want to save so you can get back to your game at a later date, and the exclusion of a save option might be a huge no, and I can understand that. Just wanted to let you fellas know, because it can be a big deal. Some of us don't really have the most flattering bank accounts during these trying times, so I feel like it's my responsibility as some schmo reviewing this game to be truthful about the game that there's a possibility that it will never be complete. That being said, fellas, even then with all the issues it currently has, at the end of the day, I wonderfully enjoyed this grotesquely, disgusting, aesthetically beautiful game. And so with that, I'm going to give World of Horror a very nice, solid 7 out of 10. What is currently available and playable will offer you countless hours of enjoyment, and hopefully will give you some decent spooks that make you want to look forward to other games or media to get into, such as board games like Eldritch horror or novels and manga like H.P. Lovecraft's or Junji Ito's work. If the game ever brings back the save feature and finishes development, then I would have no qualms whatsoever about giving World of Horror a 9 out of 10 in the future, but as it stands, it's gonna stay at a 7. I'll link down below where you can go into Panstasz's itch.io where you can grab the game and support the developer directly. The game is currently $15 US and roughly 12 euros for the Euro friends out there. But the game frequently does go on sale, so you could just wait for that as well. Well fellas, that's pretty much all I gotta say about World of Horror, and since we're done with that, let's get out of this black and white dimension and bring us back to reality. Snap us back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, literally this time. So let's do it with a 1 and a 2 and a... Hey, look at that! I'm back in color. Well, it might look like I'm in the Sunny D dimension, but you know what? I'd rather be in that realm of wonderful, tangy goodness instead of being in this one, because you know what? Interpol's still outside, and they're still pissing me off. So, but before we get to the end of the video, fellas, I want to say thanks a lot for joining me this far. Once again, I really do appreciate it watching through these videos. I don't make them too often, and there's probably going to be another dry spell here. There's a lot of games in May, but who knows, you might be watching this in the future and it don't matter. But for the people in the here and now, yeah, I'm gonna be, you know, probably a little radio silent for a little bit. But never fret, fellas, there are many more games to come and many more videos. Okay, well, maybe not many more videos, so tone it down. Of course, a few more videos before the end of the year. And with that, fellas, I'm Tomthechosen1, hating the Antichrist, and I gotta do something about it. So, I'll see you guys next time.